Hello and welcome everybody to our data release on the first estimates of wine production for this year, which as always takes place when the harvest in the Northern Hemisphere are concluded. My name is Giorgio Delgrosso. I'm the head of the Statistics and Digital Transformation Department at the OIV, and today I will make this presentation on behalf of the OIV Director General, Mr. Pauroka. Now, before starting, let me remind you that the data that I'm going to show refer to wine production excluding musts and juices, and 2023 data are just preliminary estimates and therefore potentially subject to change in the next month. As you might know, for official statistics, it takes about 3 years to be considered as consolidated. For this presentation, I will follow the chronological order of the harvest, so I will start first with the Southern Hemisphere, then I will comment on the harvest in the main producing regions in the Northern Hemisphere, and I will finally conclude with our first estimate of world wine production. So without further ado, let's start with the Southern Hemisphere, where harvest ended in April, so preliminary figures on wine production tend to be more accurate in this period of the year. After two abundant harvests in 2021 and 2022, this year wine production in the Southern Hemisphere is estimated at 45 million hectoliters, which represents a sharp decrease of 19% compared to 2022. This is the lowest production level recorded since 2003 and can be attributed, as we will see in the next slide, to extreme climatic events that took place during the growing season in all major wine-producing regions. Overall, wine production in the Southern Hemisphere in 2023 is expected to account for 19% of the world total. The largest wine-producing country of the Southern Hemisphere this year is Chile, with 10 million hectoliters, a volume 20% below last year's high production. The harvest was severely affected by wildfires and droughts. In the second place, we found Australia, with 9.9 million hectoliters, recording a decrease of 24% with respect to 2022. This is due to the combination of persistent rainfall, unusually cold temperatures, and floods caused by the effects of La Niña. In addition to this, inventory pressure led to the imposition of yield caps to reduce the oversupply of stocks. Then we have South Africa, where wine production is estimated at 9.3 million hectoliters, which marks a decrease of 10% compared to 2022. This year, the harvest has been affected by fungal disease pressure, particularly powdery and downy mildew. In Argentina, at the fourth place this year, spring frosts caused significant damage to the vineyard, and the harvest resulted to be one of the smallest in its history, with an estimated production of only 8.8 million hectoliters, which represent minus 23% over 2022. New Zealand represents once again somehow an exception in the Southern Hemisphere, with a production of 3.6 million hectoliters. It is the only country with positive growth with respect to the average observed in the last 5 years. Brazil has an estimated wine production of 2.3 million hectoliters, 30% lower than in 2022. The lack of rain during the growing season has certainly had a significant impact on the harvest volume. Finally, Uruguay, with 500,000 hectoliters, is the country in the Southern Hemisphere that recorded the largest negative variation with respect to last year, minus 34%, because of a severe drought. Let's now move to the Northern Hemisphere, for which information on the harvest has become available only recently in the last few weeks. Let's start with a look at the European Union, which accounts for more than 60% of the world's production. As you can see in the graph, wine production volume in 2023 is expected to be 150 million hectoliters, which represents an year-over-year decrease of more than 11 million hectoliters, that is 7% lower than in 2022. If this estimate is confirmed, this is going to be the third lowest production level recorded since the beginning of the century, only larger than 2017 and 2012. Preliminary estimates for wine production in European Union countries show a quite heterogeneous scenario, with very different climatic conditions recorded in the main wine regions throughout the growing season. As we will see in the next slides, in some countries a rainy spring led to fungal pressure, while storms and hail caused floods, damages, and losses in the vineyards. On the contrary, in other regions, concentrated especially in the south of the European Union, severe droughts caused hydric stress to the vines. Only a few countries this year saw good climatic conditions, which resulted in average or above average harvest volumes. Let's see now more in detail the data at the country level. The first news regarding European Union countries is that after 9 years, France in 2023 is again the first producer in the world with an estimated wine production of 45.8 million hectoliters, a level in line with 2022 and 3% above its last 5-year average. The harvest this year can be considered relatively large, even though some regions recorded negative variation with respect to last year. In this case, it is the case of Bordeaux and Sud-Ouest, where an outbreak of downy mildew was reported, and Languedoc-Roussillon, which was hit by drought. Italy, the second producer at the world level, has a wine production estimate of 43.9 million hectoliters, which is 12% lower than last year. This is the smallest production since the historically low harvest in 2017. Many factors can be attributed to this low output, but if I have to pick one, it would certainly be the downy mildew in the central and southern regions. Spain, in 2023, confirms to be the third largest wine producer in the world, with an estimated production of 30.7 million hectoliters. This represents a decrease of 14% relative to 2022 and minus 19% compared to its last 5-year average. This year volume is expected to be the lowest in the last 20 years, and this is the consequence of a severe drought. Moving to the other large producing countries within the EU, that is, the countries with production above 1 million hectoliters, the growth rates with respect to 2022, as you can see, are quite heterogeneous. On one side, positive growth is expected in Germany, which has an estimated production volume of 9 million hectoliters, plus 1% over 2022. In Portugal, with 7.4 million hectoliters, plus 8%. Romania, 4.4 million hectoliters, plus 15%, and Hungary, 2.5 million hectoliters, plus 1%. Overall, in these countries, the growing season was marked by hot and dry conditions, and the summer rainfalls led to high yields. On the other side, we have countries like Austria and Greece that expect a decrease in wine production. Particularly worrying is the situation in Greece, where the expected production of only 1.1 million hectoliters is the consequence of a combination of grape diseases, notably downy mildew, and a drought that is severely damaging the vineyard. This volume is 45% smaller than in 2022 and 50% below average. Here we have the group of European Union countries with a production volume below 1 million hectoliters. In this case, we see positive variations with respect to 2022 in Bulgaria, plus 7%, and Slovenia, plus 6%, while negative variations compared to last year were recorded in the Czech Republic, minus 13%, Croatia, minus 41%, where the harvest was almost halved by downy mildew, and Slovakia, minus 20%. We now move to the main wine-producing countries, so those countries with a production of more than 1 million hectoliters that are in the Northern Hemisphere, but outside the European Union. We start with the USA, the fourth producers at the world level, where the preliminary estimate for 2023 wine production is 25.2 million hectoliters. This figure is 12% higher compared to 2022 and 4% above its 5-year average. This growth has been favored by cool temperatures and heavy winter rains in the Napa and Sonoma regions, bringing much-needed moisture to the vines after several years of droughts. At this time of the year, data on grape harvest in China is not available yet. The first estimates for the year 2023 will be provided in our next press conference in April 2024. For what concerns the Eastern European countries, wine production in Russia is estimated at 4.9 million hectoliters, a figure in line with the volume of 2022 and 9% higher with respect to its last 5-year average. In Georgia, wine production in 2023 is estimated to be 1.5 million hectoliters, a decline of 28% compared to last year's volume and 19% below its 5-year average. This relatively low volume is due to unfavorable weather conditions such as heavy rainfall, hail, and intense winds, which severely impacted especially the eastern wine regions of the country. Similarly, Moldova is expected to produce 1.3 million hectoliters of wine in 2023, a decline of 10% with respect to last year. And we conclude with Switzerland, whose wine production is expected to be relatively high in 2023 at 1 million hectoliters, a level which is 4% higher than in 2022 and 14% above its last 5-year average. And now, finally, we get to the much-awaited world wine production estimates for the year 2023. Based on the information collected on 29 countries, which represent more than 90% of the world's production, 2023 global production is estimated to be between 242 and 247 million hectoliters, with a mid-range estimate at 244 million hectoliters. This represents a decrease of 7% compared to the already below average volume of 2022. As you can see in the line graph, the drop in world wine production after a stable trend for 4 consecutive years is significant. The 2023 production volume is forecasted to be the smallest since 1961, even lower than the historically small production of 2017. As we have seen in the previous slides, this negative scenario can be attributed to significant declines in major wine-producing countries in both hemispheres, with only a few exceptions. I would like to remind you, however, that the figure for 2023 must be taken with caution, as there are still large countries, like China, for example, whose information is not available yet. Also, the high volatility in production volumes observed over the last years at both country and regional levels makes the forecasting exercise even more difficult. Now, before concluding, I would like to share a few thoughts on the current state of the sector. What emerges from these preliminary estimates is quite clear. Once again, extreme climatic conditions, such as early frost, heavy rainfall, and drought, have significantly impacted the output of the world vineyard. Meteorological anomalies are becoming the new normality, and this is without any doubt one of the most relevant challenges for the wine sector. At the same time, it is true that in the current complicated economic and geopolitical context, where inflation remains high, global consumption of wine is declining, and stocks are rising in many regions of the world, the expected low production for this year could certainly bring equilibrium to the world wine market. So the real question here is, why is global wine consumption decreasing? The reasons why demand for wine is generally declining are many, and each country faces its own challenges. However, from a more global perspective, the world of wine has faced a series of unprecedented crises in the last 3 years that are having a significant impact and will probably lead to some structural changes in the sector. I am referring to the COVID-19 sanitary crisis started in 2020, followed by the global supply chain crisis that began in 2021, and finally, the high inflationary pressure that characterized 2022 and, to a lesser extent, 2023. The combination of these events resulted in sharp rises in production and distribution costs and generated an overall depressing effect on demand, with consumers all over the world seeing their purchasing power shrinking. On top of this, there are 2 other phenomena that should be mentioned when analyzing wine consumption. First is the role of certain health policies aiming at reducing harmful consumption of alcohol, which are certainly shaping new consumption habits in many countries, especially for younger generations. And secondly, it is a shared view among many analysts that in many countries wine is facing strong competition from other alcoholic beverages, especially those with a smaller alcohol content, such as beer. Before concluding, I take this opportunity to remind you that we will soon publish a study on the evolution of wine production and consumption over the last 20 years with a breakdown by color. This report will provide very interesting insights into the changes in consumer preferences that we have witnessed in the last years. You can find the data that I just presented on the document section of the OIV app, as well as on the statistics section of our webpage, and journalists who have specific questions related to this data release are invited to contact our press officer, Giuseppe Pucci, at press@oiv.int. My presentation ends here. Thank you for your attention.